During a long-awaited dinner with my son and his wife, our first attempt at reconciliation after years of silence, I felt my phone vibrate under the table. The message on the screen froze my breath. Stand up. Leave now. Don't tell your son. My hand trembled as I slipped the phone back into my pocket. I didn't argue. I didn't even ask why. I simply obeyed, and that choice saved my life. Because half an hour later, red and blue lights painted their mansion walls, and the police were at the door. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The night had started so simply. Soap bubbles clung to my worn hands as I scrubbed Helen's old coffee cup, the same one I wash every evening. One plate, one fork, one glass. The quiet ritual of a widower who'd grown used to silence. The kitchen light buzzed softly above me, the same fixture Helen had chosen 20 years ago, insisting it made the room warmer. It didn't. It only made the emptiness more visible. I dried the cup carefully and placed it in its usual spot on the rack, as if it mattered that the same porcelain mug occupied the same space night after night. Maybe it did. Maybe keeping order was all I had left. On the fridge, a fading photograph hung under a cracked magnet, my son David at his high school graduation, beaming in a cap and gown. Helen's arm was wrapped proudly around him, and I stood just off to the side, trying not to cry as I snapped the picture. That photo lived on the fridge, not because it was perfect, but because it was the last time I remembered us being a real family. Before the arguments. Before the requests for money. Before the silence that settled in like mold. The shrill ring of the landline sliced through my reverie. I nearly dropped the dish towel, fumbling to catch it as the sound echoed through the small house. Caller ID glowed against my glasses. The name hit me like a hammer. David. My son. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. A year of silence stretched between us like an ocean I had no way of crossing. The last time we'd spoken, he'd stormed out after I refused to hand him $50,000 for a startup that already sounded doomed. I had built my chain of auto garages one wrench and one customer at a time. I wasn't about to fund a dream built on borrowed air. That was the night he called me a bitter old man who didn't believe in him. That was the night we stopped being father and son. But now his name was on my phone. I lifted the receiver slowly. My throat tightened. Hello? My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. Dad. His tone carried that same hesitation he had when he was a boy and broke something valuable. Not anger, but fear of being judged. It's me. My chest constricted. For a second I couldn't speak. David. I wasn't expecting. I know he cut me off. I know it's been too long. Way too long. I could hear him breathing hard as though the call itself took courage. But I don't want to waste any more time. Claire and I miss you. We miss family. The word family hung in the air like smoke. I hadn't heard it from him in years. I miss it too. I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. Dad, would you come for dinner tonight? Claire's making that roast you love. We want to talk. Talk. Like before. I glanced at the wedding photo on my mantle. David handsome in a black tux. Claire flawless in white silk. Helen radiant beside me, whispering, "He'll be fine, Eddie. Families always find their way back." I wanted to believe her now. Tonight, my voice gave away my shock. Tonight, he said firmly, "We've wasted enough time." His voice softened. "Thank you for giving us another chance." After I hung up, I sat staring at the photo. Helen's smile met mine from behind the glass frame. It almost felt like her voice was whispering again. "It's time, Edward. It's time to come home." I rose from my chair with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. Upstairs, my bedroom looked like a museum no one visited. Helen's scarves still draped the dresser. Her perfume bottles, untouched but still faintly fragrant, lined the shelf. Dust swirled in the late afternoon light like tiny ghosts. I opened my closet. My fingers brushed past work shirts stiff with grease stains until they found the navy suit still wrapped in plastic. Helen had bought it for me the day David graduated college. "You need something nice for important occasions," she'd said, smoothing the lapels with those careful hands. That suit had been with me at anniversaries, job interviews, and finally her funeral. Tonight it would walk me back into my son's life. In the bathroom, the mirror reflected a man I barely recognized. Lines dug deeper into my face. Silver hair outnumbered the black. My eyes still carried a spark, but it flickered. I shaved carefully as though looking younger might bridge the years. Before leaving, I opened the drawer of my nightstand. Inside lay the pocket watch Helen gave me on our wedding day. "So you'll never lose time with me," she had teased. I wound it once, hearing the tiny gears click to life, and slipped it into my vest pocket. Some part of me believed she would walk beside me tonight. I booked a car through the app. Montclair, New Jersey, 40 minutes away, another world from my modest house in Queens. As the driver pulled up, I clutched a bottle of 20-year-old scotch, my peace offering. The ride was quiet. Streetlights blurred past as the city gave way to open highway, then to manicured lawns and sprawling estates. Montclair was a place where hedge clippers hummed every Saturday and fountains danced for nobody but their owners. When the car stopped before a mansion with stone columns and glowing windows, my stomach sank. This wasn't the life David had when I last saw him. How had he managed this? I stepped out slowly. Shoes polished but not new clicked against stone. The front door opened before I could knock. A woman stood there, mid-50s, with weary eyes and a crisp black dress. A housekeeper. "Mr. Harris," she said warmly, but her smile flickered like a candle in the wind. "I'm Lucia. Please come in." Something in her eyes unsettled me. Gratitude. Fear. It vanished before I could name it. The foyer stretched wide with marble floors and a chandelier that could have paid off my mortgage. Oil paintings hung like silent judges. The air smelled of fresh lilies. Dad David's voice echoed down the hall. He appeared looking like he had stepped out of a magazine spread. Expensive suit, perfect hair, a smile too eager, too polished. He hugged me tightly, a beat too long. "You look great." Before I could respond, Claire emerged. Silk dress, flawless makeup, diamonds catching the light. She kissed my cheek. "Edward, finally. We're so happy you're here." I managed to smile, but the sheer opulence pressed in on me. "This place, it's incredible." "How did you real estate?" David cut in quickly. His laugh rang hollow. "Caught the market at the right time. Lucky break." Claire linked her arm through mine. "Come, let's get you comfortable." I handed David the scotch. His face lit up as he studied the label. "Dad, this is fantastic. You shouldn't have." We walked into a dining room that belonged in a glossy magazine. Mahogany table china, gleaming silver, perfectly aligned. The chandelier above rained warm light over every detail. My chair was waiting at the head of the table. Claire smiled warmly. "We want tonight to be special, to start over." I sat down, smoothing my suit as I glanced around. For the first time in years, I felt a fragile thread of hope weaving itself through me. Maybe Helen had been right. Maybe families did find their way back. But then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. My blood chilled as I read it. "Stand up. Leave now. Don't tell your son." The words on the glowing screen burned into my eyes. "Stand up. Leave now. Don't tell your son." My breath caught my fingers, trembling just enough to make the phone slip slightly against my palm. David's laugh rang at the edge of the table, too bright, too eager, as if he were trying to prove something not only to me but to himself. Claire reached for the wine bottle, pouring with flawless grace, her smile practiced like a dancer's final bow. They didn't notice the way my knuckles whitened around my napkin. They didn't hear the pounding in my chest. I forced a nod, swallowing whatever expression threatened to betray me. "Excuse me," I muttered, rising from the table with a hand against my stomach. "Too much roast, too fast." David chuckled politely, but his eyes were sharp, studying me the way gamblers study dice before a throw. Claire's hand lingered on my forearm for just a moment longer than comfort allowed. In the hallway, the noise of silverware and low conversation faded into a muffled hum. I leaned against the cool wall, my breath unsteady. Who would send that message? How did they know I was here? The chandelier above me buzzed faintly, each flicker of light like a warning. And just like that, the hallway blurred, and I was back in another house, another time. Helen's laughter echoed in my memory, soft and certain, filling our kitchen in Queens the way sunlight fills a cracked window. She had flour on her hands that evening, baking a pie for David's 16th birthday. He had walked in late, smelling of cigarette smoke he swore wasn't his. I remembered the way he avoided my eyes, muttering about friends, about being misunderstood. "He's just a boy," Helen had whispered to me later, brushing my shoulder, as if her touch could smooth away my worry. "He'll grow out of it. Don't be so hard on him, Ed." But even then, I saw the restless hunger in David's eyes. Not for food, not for family, but for something quicker, sharper. He wanted shortcuts always. Money that came fast, applause that didn't have to be earned. I had hoped marriage to Claire would settle him. Helen had even told me on their wedding day, "She's steady. She'll keep him grounded." Looking at Claire tonight, her hand heavy with jewelry and her eyes too calculating, I realized how wrong we'd been. I pushed the memory aside, but it clung to me like grease on a mechanic's shirt. Years of silence had allowed me to imagine David softening, maturing, finding honesty in work the way I had. But the suit, the mansion, the rehearsed smiles, none of it matched the boy I had raised. The hallway clock chimed once, a deep, resonant sound that pulled me back. I adjusted my tie, trying to still my trembling hands. I pulled out Helen's pocket watch, its brass worn smooth from years of my thumb brushing it absent-mindedly. The tick was steady, patient. She had given it to me with a smile, saying, "So you'll always know where you stand in time. Tonight, I needed it more than ever." A voice startled me. "Mr. Harris." I turned. Lucia stood halfway down the hall, a tray of empty glasses balanced perfectly in her hands. Her eyes met mine for just a second, and though her lips didn't move, her gaze spoke volumes. It was the same look Helen used to give me when David was lying through his teeth as a teenager, gentle, pained, but unflinching. "Everything all right, sir?" she asked louder this time, her accent softening the edges of her words. I forced a smile. "Yes, just catching my breath." She nodded slowly, but the way her shoulders shifted told me she knew more. Her eyes flicked briefly to my pocket, the pocket where I had slipped my phone. Then she turned, disappearing into the kitchen without another word. Back at the table, David leaned forward, elbows on mahogany polished to a mirror shine. "Everything okay, Dad?" "You look pale." His smile was warm, but his eyes glittered with something else. "Fine," I lied. Taking my seat again. "Just these rich meals, not used to it anymore." Claire laughed lightly. "We'll have to get you used to them. We want you here often." The words should have felt like comfort. Instead, they fell over me like chains. For a while, I let their voices blur, answering when needed, nodding when polite. But my mind wandered back. For the first time, David asked for money beyond reason. To the way his tone hardened when I said no. To that slammed door, the echo of his car peeling out into the night. I remembered Helen that night too, standing at the window with tears she tried to hide. "You're doing the right thing," she told me, her voice trembling. "We can't keep bailing him out. He has to learn." But he hadn't learned. He had only grown sharper in his requests, more persuasive in his smiles. The memory collided with the present. The perfect roast on my plate, the untouched glass of wine before me, Claire's careful laughter, David's restless drumming fingers. It all lined up too neatly like a stage play practiced too many times. And then it came again, my phone vibrating quietly in my pocket. I shifted in my chair, pulling it out under the tablecloth. Another message from the same unknown number. "The drink is not safe. Watch carefully. Don't let them push papers tonight." I nearly dropped the phone. My eyes darted to the glasses on the table. David's whiskey sat half full. Mine glistened untouched amber liquid catching the chandelier light. Claire's hand slid toward me, gentle coaxing. "You should have a sip," she said softly, like a suggestion rather than a command. "It'll help you relax." David's laugh followed, too loud, too fast. "Yes, Dad, it's the good stuff. Nothing but the best for you." The last time I had heard that tone from him was when he was 10, swearing he hadn't broken the neighbor's window even though the baseball was still in his hand. I smiled faintly, setting the glass aside with deliberate care. "Maybe later. I want to savor it." Claire's smile wavered. David's fingers stopped drumming. A silence stretched too long before they filled it again with nervous chatter. Inside, my mind churned. Someone in this house knew what was happening. Someone cared enough to risk warning me. And I had a sinking feeling I knew who. The tick of Helen's watch in my vest pocket was louder than their voices. Louder than my doubt. Louder than fear. I turned the glass slowly in my hand, letting the chandelier light catch on the amber surface. At first glance, it looked like any fine whiskey, smooth, glowing, almost celebratory. But when I tilted it just so, I saw something else, faint particles swirling at the bottom like dust trapped in honey. I blinked hard. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe my eyes, tired and strained, played tricks. Still, the words from the text glared in my memory. "The drink is not safe." Claire leaned closer, her perfume pressing in. "Edward, you haven't touched it. You always liked a good drink." Her smile was tender on the surface, but her eyes betrayed urgency. "I'm pacing myself," I said lightly, setting the glass down. My fingers tingled as though even touching the rim left residue. David forced a chuckle. "Dad's always been disciplined. That's why he built his garages from the ground up." "Right, Dad." His eyes darted quickly to Claire, then back to me. Something in the way he said it felt rehearsed, like a line from a play. "Yes," I said slowly, my voice steadier than I felt. "Discipline and trust." "Exactly," David replied too quickly. "Trust is everything. Which is why we wanted to talk to you tonight. About the future." The word future landed like a hammer. I folded my hands on the table, Helen's pocket watch pressing cold against my vest. "Go on." Claire placed her hand delicately over mine. Her skin was cool, her nails perfectly manicured. "You've worked so hard all your life. Don't you ever think about slowing down? About letting someone else carry the load?" "Succession planning." David added his smile too wide. "You know, making sure your legacy continues." I pulled my hand back gently, keeping my expression calm. Inside, my chest burned. So this was it. The reunion, the roast, the polished silver, all of it had been theater leading to this conversation. I kept my tone neutral. "My legacy is doing just fine." Claire's smile flickered. David pressed harder. "Dad, we're not saying now. Just soon. You've got, 7 garages, properties across Queens and Brooklyn. That's a lot to manage." "What if something happened? What if you got sick?" Helen's voice rushed back to me from a decade ago, whispering on a hospital night when David had crashed her car and begged us to pay for damages. "If we keep rescuing him, he'll never learn to stand." I stared at my son now, the grown man in a tailored suit speaking with the same pleading urgency he'd used as a teenager. Except now, the stakes weren't a broken bumper. They were my life's work. "Life is unpredictable," I admitted carefully. "But some things must be earned." The silence that followed was heavy. Claire reached for her glass, covering her disappointment with a sip of wine. David tapped his fingers against the table, an old nervous habit. Lucia entered just then, carrying another tray of glasses. She set them down with hands that trembled slightly, the clink louder than it should have been. For just a heartbeat, her eyes flicked to me, then to the whiskey glass untouched by my hand. Then she looked away, retreating to the kitchen like a shadow. I wanted to follow her to demand answers, but David's voice reeled me back. "You know," he said too casually, "Claire's been reading about the power of attorney. Just in case something unexpected happens. Families should be prepared." My blood ran cold. "Prepared," I repeated softly, feeling the weight of each syllable. "Exactly," Claire chimed in, her tone honeyed. "So no one else, outsiders, lawyers, strangers, ever interferes. It should all stay in the family." I forced a smile, though my stomach turned. "Outsiders can be very loyal sometimes," I murmured, glancing toward the kitchen door where Lucia had vanished. Neither of them caught the edge in my tone. The conversation shifted, but my focus didn't. I studied the table, the papers stacked neatly near David's elbow, half concealed beneath a linen napkin. Not menus, not decoration, documents. I could see the corner of a notary seal peeking out. Claire leaned forward again, changing the subject with a polished ease. "Tell us about your garages, Edward. 7 locations, yes. Which one's doing best?" Her eyes sparkled, but not with curiosity, with calculation. I sipped water instead of whiskey, letting the coolness calm the fire in my chest. "They all do fine," I answered, vague and steady. "Each one has something Helen left in it. Her touch, her advice. They're built on more than numbers." David chuckled, but it sounded hollow. "Sentiment's nice, Dad, but sentiment doesn't pay the bills. Business is about margins, expansion, and growth. You taught me that." I looked at him, really looked. For the first time in years, I saw the shadow of a boy chasing shortcuts, hungry for applause, terrified of failure. Except now he wore a suit and sat in a mansion bought with debt I couldn't yet name. "You remember what I taught you," I said evenly. "But did you ever learn it?" His smile faltered. Claire shifted uncomfortably. The room chilled with the weight of words unspoken. I glanced again at the whiskey glass. The sediment sparkled faintly under the chandelier like shards of broken trust. My heart thudded. I needed to move. I needed to think. "Excuse me again," I said, rising slowly. "Bathroom this time." David laughed too quickly. "Of course, Dad. Second door on the left." Claire's eyes followed me as I stepped into the hallway once more. The air outside the dining room felt clearer, freer. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen, waiting for another message that might explain everything. And then it came. "Do not sign anything. Not tonight. Watch their hands. Watch the papers." My pulse quickened. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't imagination. Someone inside this house knew the danger I was in. Someone wanted me alive, not compliant. The tick of Helen's watch pressed against my chest like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I clutched it, whispering silently, "I hear you, Helen. I hear you." I turned toward the kitchen, drawn by the faint sound of running water. The clink of glass. Lucia's voice hummed quietly as if to herself. My steps slowed, careful, deliberate. She didn't look up as I entered. Her shoulders tensed, but her hands kept moving, scrubbing glasses with methodical precision. "Long night," I said softly. She nodded once, still not looking at me. "Yes, sir." Her voice carried something beneath the politeness, something urgent. I opened my mouth to ask, but before I could, the faint echo of Claire's heels clicked down the hallway. Lucia's humming stopped. Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. Without a word, she shook her head, a subtle gesture that screamed louder than any shout. "Not now." I stepped back into the hallway just as Claire appeared, her smile perfectly intact. "Everything all right?" she asked sweetly. "Perfect." I lied, my chest tight. She looped her arm through mine again. "Good. Then let's get back. Dessert is almost ready." As she guided me back toward the dining room, I glanced over my shoulder. Lucia's face was half hidden in the kitchen doorway, her eyes locked on mine. In them I saw fear. And something else. A choice. I knew then the cracks had begun to show. And once cracks appear, walls never hold for long. Back at the dining table, the silverware gleamed like polished weapons. Claire's laugh floated across the room, too light, too sharp. David poured more wine as if nothing were amiss, though his eyes never stopped watching me. My untouched glass of whiskey remained at my elbow, its surface swirling with secrets. I forced a smile. "I'll skip the drink for now. Water suits me better." David's brow furrowed. "Come on, Dad, you always enjoyed a good glass." "Some tastes change," I said evenly. His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. That was when my phone buzzed again in my pocket. I excused myself with a polite cough, pretending to adjust my jacket. The screen glowed kitchen. 5 minutes. Alone. I lifted my glass of water, masking my reaction with a slow sip. Across the table, Claire studied me carefully. Her smile stretched too thin. Dessert arrived, Lucia carrying a tray of small creme brulees, their tops caramelized to perfection. She moved with practiced grace, but when she placed mine before me, her hand brushed the table just a second too long, her eyes flicking to the hallway. The message had been hers. I knew it now. I waited, letting David and Claire chatter about investments, about new real estate opportunities, about a trip to Europe they were planning. Their words blurred background noise to the thud of my pulse. 5 minutes later, I pushed back my chair. "Excuse me again," I said softly. "Old man's bladder." Claire laughed, though the sound was brittle. "We'll keep dessert warm." I walked into the hallway, then turned toward the kitchen. The scent of roasted meat lingered in the air, mingling with the sweetness of caramel. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Lucia stood at the sink, drying her hands on a towel. When she saw me, her eyes darted to the door, then back to mine. "Mr. Harris," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't drink. Don't sign." I swallowed hard. "You sent the messages." She nodded quickly, eyes wide with fear. "They put something in your whiskey. Not safe. They plan papers tonight. Transfer. Everything." Her accent thickened with urgency. "Please, you must not." For a moment the room tilted. Hearing it aloud stripped away any hope I had clung to that maybe I was imagining things, maybe grief and suspicion were making me paranoid. But no, this was real. I steadied myself against the counter. "How do you know this, I clean?" she said simply. "I hear, I see. They talk like I am not here, like I am furniture." Her eyes glistened with something between anger and sorrow. They said, "If you sign, you forget tomorrow. They take control. All of it." Her words pressed against my chest like iron. Helen's face flashed in my mind, her laugh, her steady hand, her insistence that we build something honest. To think of it stolen by signatures tricked out of me, it made my stomach turn. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Claire's voice, light and sweet, carried toward the kitchen. Lucia's hand shot out, gripping my arm tightly. "Say nothing. Please. For both of us." I nodded just as Claire appeared in the doorway, her silk dress catching the light. "Edward," she sang, her smile fixed. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," I said smoothly. "Lucia was just telling me about the dessert." "Lovely work." Lucia lowered her eyes, retreating to the sink, playing her role once again. Claire's gaze lingered a moment too long before she slipped her arm through mine. "Come back. David is eager to continue our talk." Back in the dining room, David had laid out a small stack of papers near my plate. The embossed notary seal glimmered faintly under the chandelier. He smiled as if this were nothing unusual. "Dad, I wanted to show you something. Just a draft. Nothing binding." The papers sat there like a trap, patient and deadly. I glanced at my son, my blood, and felt a chill settle over me. Later I said quietly, "Dessert first." Claire's smile froze just for an instant. David's jaw tightened, but he forced a laugh. "Sure, Dad. Dessert first." I picked up the spoon, breaking through the caramel crust of the crème brûlée. The crack echoed in the silence, sharper than it should have been. I tasted the custard, rich and sweet, though it turned to ash in my mouth. The papers remained beside me, waiting. My son's smile remained plastered on his face, though his eyes betrayed the storm beneath. And somewhere behind us, in the quiet refuge of the kitchen, I knew Lucia was listening, hoping I had heard her warning, hoping I would live through this night. Then my phone vibrated once more. A new message, shorter this time: "Urgent police. Call now." The spoon slipped from my fingers, clattering against porcelain. David and Claire both looked up sharply. I forced a chuckle, shaking my head. Clumsy me. But inside, the seed had been planted. Chaos was coming. The message still glowed on my phone: "Police. Call now." The words pulsed in my vision like a beacon. My fingers tightened around the device, but I kept my face still, my body calm. Across the table, David's smile held, though it was brittle at the edges. Claire dabbed her lips with her napkin, her eyes flicking toward the papers beside my plate. "Dad," David said lightly, "you dropped your spoon. Want me to get you another?" I shook my head, forcing a chuckle. "No need. I'll manage." My voice sounded steadier than the chaos inside me. I needed to act, but more than that, I needed someone I could trust. Someone who wasn't blinded by greed or weighed down by years of disappointment. Someone who had already risked everything to keep me alive. I thought of Lucia, the way her voice trembled when she whispered, "They talk like I am not here, like I am furniture." She had seen, she had heard, and still she had chosen to warn me. When dessert ended, I excused myself once more. David frowned but said nothing. Claire's eyes tracked me like a hawk, but her smile remained in place. I moved through the hallway past the glittering foyer toward the kitchen. Lucia stood by the sink again, hands busy but shoulders rigid. When I stepped inside, she froze. Her eyes darted to the door, then to me. "I got your message," I whispered. Her lips parted, but no sound came at first. Finally, "You must call. Now. Before it is too late." I glanced toward the doorway. Empty. "Lucia," I said, lowering my voice further, "you've already risked more than I should ask." "Why are you helping me?" Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away. "Because you looked at me like a person, not like background. They don't. They laugh. They say words when I clean words they think I don't understand." Her hands shook slightly as she wiped them on a towel. "They don't care about you, Mr. Harris. They care only for what you built. And if they take it, they will throw you away like—" Her voice broke. "Like they treat me." For a moment I was silent. The weight of her words pressed against my chest. I had spent my life surrounded by engines' grease and men who measured worth in labor. I knew honesty when I saw it, and I saw it in her trembling gaze. I pulled out Helen's pocket watch, the metal warm from my hand. "My wife used to say the best people are the ones who do right when no one's watching. That's what you've done tonight." Lucia swallowed hard. "Then let me help more." Her words startled me. "Help more?" She nodded, voice steadier now. "I know where the papers are. I know what they plan. They left copies in the office upstairs. I can show you." My breath caught. "Evidence. Proof. Lucia, if they catch you—" "They already think I am invisible," she said, her chin lifting slightly. "Maybe that is my protection." For the first time that evening I felt a flicker of hope stronger than fear. "Then yes," I whispered. "Show me." We moved quietly, every step measured. Up the grand staircase, down a hallway lined with portraits of ancestors that weren't theirs. Claire's taste, no doubt. At the end of the hall, Lucia pushed open a door to a study. Inside, the air smelled of leather and ink. A mahogany desk dominated the room. On it lay a neat stack of folders. Lucia pointed. "There." I stepped forward, fingers brushing the top page. My stomach churned as I read the title, Power of Attorney. My name is printed in bold. David's name is listed as the transferee. Further pages detailed asset transfers, my garages, my accounts, even the deed to my modest home in Queens. Every piece of my life reduced to lines on paper waiting for a signature drugged out of me. I exhaled slowly, forcing calm. "This is enough," I murmured. "If the police see these, it's over." Lucia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we must get them to the police." I nodded, slipping my phone from my pocket. My thumb hovered over the numbers. But before I could dial, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Lucia stiffened, her eyes wide. I shoved the papers back into place, closing the folder. We barely made it to the far side of the room when the door opened. David stepped in, his smile strained. "Dad, I wondered where you'd wandered off to." His eyes flicked to Lucia, then back to me. "I hope you're not bothering the help with old stories." My jaw clenched, but I forced a calm smile. "Just admiring the house," I said. "Claire's done well decorating." David chuckled, though his gaze lingered on the desk a second too long. "Yes, she has a gift." The silence stretched. I slid my phone back into my pocket, my thumb still tingling from the number I hadn't dialed. David's smile widened, but his voice carried an edge. "Come back downstairs, Dad. We've got more to discuss." "Of course," I said smoothly. As he turned, Lucia met my eyes, her expression taut with warning. "Not yet," it said, "but soon." Back at the table, Claire poured fresh wine. David placed a pen beside the papers near my plate, as if it belonged there naturally. "Whenever you're ready," he said cheerfully, though his knuckles tapped against the table in nervous rhythm. I picked up Helen's pocket watch under the table, feeling its steady tick against my palm. Time was moving, but this time it was on my side. Across the table, Lucia emerged quietly from the kitchen, again clearing plates, her expression blank. But when her eyes met mine, just for a second, I saw the promise she'd made upstairs. "You're not alone." The air thickened with tension, but inside me something shifted. For the first time all evening, I wasn't simply surviving. I had an ally, and together we would wait for the right moment to strike. The pen sat there on the table, gleaming under the chandelier like a dagger disguised in silver. David leaned back in his chair, smiling too widely while Claire folded her hands neatly, her eyes flicking toward me every few seconds. My untouched glass of whiskey still rested by my plate, amber liquid catching the light like a warning. I slipped Helen's pocket watch from my vest pocket and let its steady tick ground me. Time was still on my side, but only just. "I'll look these over later," I said calmly, sliding the papers an inch away from me. "No rush tonight." David's jaw flexed, though his smile didn't fade. "Of course, Dad. No rush." But the pen still waited, a silent threat between us. That was when I felt the faintest vibration in my pocket. My phone. I risked a glance under the table. Another message from the same anonymous number: "Save evidence. Delay. Police already alerted." Relief washed through me like cool air. Whoever was helping Lucia I had no doubt now was one step ahead. I let out a slow breath. "Claire," I said, shifting the subject, "tell me about your family. You've always been such a good hostess." Her smile warmed instantly, and she launched into a tale about her mother's garden parties. David looked annoyed but kept quiet. My tactic had worked. For now. Later, after dessert plates were cleared, I excused myself once more. My son's eyes narrowed, but he didn't protest. Claire touched his arm, whispering something that calmed him. I moved toward the kitchen where Lucia was waiting, rinsing glasses at the sink. She didn't look up, but her voice was steady. "You must keep the papers safe. Don't let them vanish." "They'll notice if I take them," I whispered. "Not now," she said quickly. "But later. After." Her eyes finally met mine. "Do you trust me?" I studied her face. The fine lines of fatigue, the quiet strength in her gaze. I nodded. "Yes." She handed me a towel as if to dry my hands, but hidden in the fold was a small flash drive. "Take this," she murmured. I copied what they printed this week. Contracts, letters, their emails, enough to show intent. The towel nearly slipped from my hand. "Lucia, how did you—" "They leave computers open," she said softly. "Phones unlocked. They think I am nothing. So I became invisible, and invisible people can see everything." Her voice carried both pride and sorrow. I felt a weight settle in my chest, not of fear, but of gratitude. "You've done more than I could ask. You must finish it," she said firmly. "Give to the police. Tonight." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. She turned back to the sink, humming faintly. I tucked the flash drive into my vest pocket next to Helen's watch. 2 anchors, one of love, one of survival. David appeared in the doorway, smiling tightly. "Everything all right in here?" "Perfect," I said evenly, drying my hands with the towel she had given me. "Just needed a breather." He studied me a moment too long before nodding. "Come back. We'll open another bottle." Back at the table, the air felt heavier. I played my part, nodding, smiling, telling stories about the garages, but each word was measured, each gesture deliberate. My mind was already working on the plan. Delay. Gather evidence. Protect. At one point, David leaned in, lowering his voice. "Dad, we're just trying to help you. You've worked hard enough. Let us take the burden." I met his gaze steadily. "A burden is different from a legacy, son. Don't confuse the two." His smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "Of course. Legacy, that's what we mean." Claire refilled his glass, her hand brushing his shoulder with a subtle warning. I caught it. He did too. He leaned back, the mask slipping back into place. Hours stretched, each minute heavy with pretense. Finally, when I insisted I should be heading home, Claire protested, but not too hard. David walked me to the foyer, hugging me stiffly. "Think about what we said," he murmured. "Tomorrow, maybe." I nodded, my face calm, but inside I knew tomorrow would bring something else entirely. The night air hit me like a blessing as I stepped outside. I ordered a car, watching the mansion's lights glow behind me. From the kitchen window, I caught a glimpse of Lucia's silhouette, still and silent like a sentinel. Back in Queens, my house felt smaller than ever, but safer. I set the flash drive on my desk next to the photo of Helen. Her smile seemed to shine brighter under the lamplight. "I'm doing this for us," I whispered. I called my lawyer Mr. Klein, an old friend who had seen me through contracts, disputes, and expansions. His voice was groggy but alert. "Edward, at this hour I need you," I said simply. "There are papers, fraud, attempted coercion, and I have proof." There was a pause, then his voice sharpened. "Tell me everything." I did. Slowly, carefully, each detail laid out like tools on a workbench. He listened, his breathing steady. Finally, "Don't meet them again alone. We'll prepare. I'll contact law enforcement first thing in the morning." "Too late," I said softly. "They're already coming." He was silent for a beat. Then, "Edward, you must stay alive until they arrive." I laughed once dryly. "That's the plan." After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my living room, Helen's watch ticking steadily. I felt the weight of the flash drive in my vest, the steady hum of her memory beside me. For the first time all evening, I wasn't just reacting. I was ready. The morning after that long night, I sat at my kitchen table in Queen's Helen's pocket watch, ticking softly beside my coffee cup. The flash drive Lucia had given me lay next to it, a tiny piece of plastic that carried the weight of my entire future. Mr. Klein, my lawyer, had promised to contact the authorities, but I wasn't the kind of man to just wait. I had spent my life fixing engines, and when something rattled, you didn't sit back and hope it went away. You opened the hood and found the source. At 9 a.m., my phone rang. David. I let it buzz 3 times before answering. Dad. His voice came fast, too bright, like he'd been rehearsing. I hope you got home all right. Claire was worried. I sipped my coffee before replying. Home just fine. My tone was calm but firm. And I've been thinking about last night. There was a pause. Then he chuckled. That's good. You see what we mean, right? About planning for the future. I let the silence hang just long enough to make him nervous. David, tell me something. Where did you get the money for that mansion? Another pause. Longer this time. Real estate, Dad. I told you. Don't lie to me. My voice cut through the line, steady as steel. For a moment, all I heard was his breathing, ragged now. Then, like a leak springing from a pipe, words spilled out. It was just some deals, all right. High-stakes investments. Everybody does it. I just need more time. More time for what? His voice cracked. For the loan. For the people who... He stopped abruptly, but it was too late. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes fixed on Helen's photo on the wall. The people who... What, David? He didn't answer. You owe money, I said flatly. A lot of it. And you thought the solution was to drug your father and steal what he built. Dad, it's not like that. It's exactly like that. His breath quickened. You don't understand. These people, if I don't pay, they'll... He cut himself off again, realizing how much he had said. I didn't let him recover. I understand more than you think, and I also know the police will understand when they see the papers you left on that table, the ones with my name and your signature. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. You didn't... I didn't... What, I asked coldly. Take them. Keep evidence. David, you've always underestimated me. That was your first mistake. The silence that followed was thick with panic. I could almost hear the sweat forming on his brow. Finally, he snapped. You can't do this. If you go to the police, you'll ruin me. No, son, I said quietly. You ruined yourself. I ended the call, letting the click echo in my kitchen like a judge's gavel. The first strike had landed. The rest of the day, the phone buzzed constantly. Missed calls from David. Text from Claire written in her polished, sugary tone. We love you. We only want what's best. Please don't be rash. But by mid-afternoon, another number called. Unknown. I hesitated, then answered. A man's voice low and smooth. Mr. Harris. Yes, you don't know me, but your son owes us money. A lot of it. And if he can't pay, we'll collect another way. My grip on the phone tightened, but I kept my voice even. Then you should know I have the police involved already. If anything happens to me, they'll know where to look. A pause. Then a chuckle, humorless and cold. Smart man. But police don't always solve problems fast enough. The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly, my jaw clenched. They knew me now. The noose was tightening not just on David, but on me. That evening I returned to the garage office in Brooklyn. My employees greeted me with easy smiles, unaware of the storm brewing. I walked into my small back office, shut the door, and opened my laptop. I inserted the flash drive. Folders bloomed across the screen, drafts of contracts, emails between David and Claire discussing sedatives and transfer strategy, even notes about when I was most likely to be alone. Reading their words was like swallowing glass. My son's name, my life's work, all reduced to a transaction. Claire's tone in the emails was colder than ice. Edward will cave once he's relaxed. He always has. They thought they knew me. They thought wrong. I copied everything to my hard drive, then printed the worst of it. The hum of the printer sounded like an engine revving before a race, steady, inevitable. By midnight, I had a file thick with evidence. I slipped it into my briefcase, locking it tight. The next morning, I decided it was time to let David feel the pressure. I dialed his number, this time with purpose. He answered instantly. Dad, thank God. Listen about yesterday. Save it, I said. I want to talk face to face. At the garage. 10 o'clock. He hesitated. The garage, yes. My place. Neutral ground. There was a long silence, then fine. I'll be there. When he arrived, his suit looked more rumpled than usual, his eyes bloodshot. Claire wasn't with him. He walked into my office, forcing a smile. Dad, I sit. My voice was sharp, leaving no room for argument. He sat. I opened the briefcase, slowly pulling out a stack of papers. His eyes widened as he recognized them. Where did you... From your own house, I cut in. From your desk. Don't insult me by pretending you don't know what these are. His face paled. Dad, I can explain. You can't, I said. What you can do is listen. Because from now on, every step you take will be watched. Every word you say is weighed. And if you think you can intimidate me, remember this. I tapped the folder. I hold the evidence. His lips trembled. For the first time since he was a boy, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. And then in his panic, he slipped. They'll kill me if I don't pay, he shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. Do you understand? You're not saving yourself by doing this, you're signing my death warrant. The words echoed in the small office. He realized too late what he had admitted. I leaned back in my chair, calm as stone. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to poison me. His mouth opened closed. No words came. I let the silence stretch until he squirmed. Then I gathered the papers, calmly sliding them back into the briefcase. This conversation is over, I said quietly. Dad, please, get out. He hesitated, then stood slowly, shoulders hunched. For once, he looked smaller than me, diminished. As he walked out of the office, I pulled Helen's pocket watch from my vest, feeling its steady tick. I had landed the first blow, and it had hit hard. The war had truly begun. The morning sun filtered weakly through my kitchen blinds, casting lines of pale gold across the table. Helen's pocket watch ticked steadily beside my cup of black coffee, its rhythm calmer than my heart. The folder of evidence lay open, pages spilling across the wood like scattered confessions. I thought the night would grant me peace. It didn't. My phone buzzed before I even finished my toast. A news alert. Brooklyn businessman under investigation for questionable real estate investments. And there, plain as day, was David's name, my son's name. For a moment, my breath caught. I had prepared for police involvement, yes, but not this fast, not public. The story cited anonymous sources close to the family. I closed my eyes and knew. Lucia, invisible no more. She had gone further than I thought. By 9 a.m., David's voice boomed through my phone. What did you do? I didn't call the press, I said calmly. But maybe someone tired of being invisible finally did. You're destroying me! His voice cracked into rage. Do you have any idea what this will do? The investors will pull out. The banks? Maybe you should have thought of that, I said, before you signed my name onto a forged contract. He cursed under his breath. Then, softer, Dad, you're making a mistake. They'll come after you too. Then let them come, I said coldly. And I ended the call. By noon, I drove to the garage, the old Chevy humming beneath me like an old friend. The office smelled of oil and dust, familiar grounding. Miguel, a former apprentice of mine who now runs his shop across town, stopped by. He leaned against the doorframe, eyes sharp with concern. Eddie, he said, you all right? Folks are talking. Word is your boy's in trouble. Big trouble. I nodded slowly. The word's true. He hesitated, then pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket. I didn't want to drag you in deeper, but you should see this. Someone came by my shop last week, a guy asking questions about you, about your health, your will, said he was working with David. Left this card. I unfolded the paper. A business card. The name was unfamiliar, but the logo belonged to a notorious loan syndicate in the city. My gut clenched. Miguel's voice lowered. They're not the kind you want around your family. I looked him in the eye. They're already around. But thank you, Miguel. More than you know. He gripped my shoulder firm. You need anything, you call me. Doesn't matter what. A small ember of warmth lit in my chest. An unexpected ally. That evening I stayed late in the garage, reviewing every page of the evidence again. I highlighted lines, tagged emails, and prepared duplicates. If they tried to destroy one copy, 10 more would survive. But across town, chaos was brewing. Lucia called me from her car, whispering urgently, "Mr. Harris, I need to tell you. David and Claire, they're fighting." Bad. She said he's weak, that he panicked too soon. He said she pushed him into it. I heard it all through the kitchen door. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. "They're cracking." "Yes," she said, "and she's dangerous when she cracks. Be careful." Later that night, as if to confirm her warning, my phone rang again. This time it was Claire herself. Her voice was honey over steel. "Edward," she purred, "we've had misunderstandings. You're a reasonable man. Let's sit down. Just you and me. Tomorrow." "I'm not interested," I said. Her tone sharpened. "Don't be foolish. You don't want your family dragged through the mud. Do you think of your reputation? Think of Helen." The mention of Helen was deliberate, a knife meant to cut deep. I breathed slowly before answering. "Don't ever use her name again." My voice was ice. There was a pause, then a hiss. "You'll regret this." And the line went dead. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table watching the ticking papers spread before me. Memories drifted of David as a boy handing me wrenches, his face smeared with grease proud when he got it right. How had that boy become this man? I thought of Claire smiling sweetly at family dinners, slipping poison into conversations long before she tried to slip it into my glass. And I thought of Lucia, quiet, overlooked now, risking everything to shield me. I realized I wasn't just fighting for my legacy. I was fighting for the truth, for dignity, for the invisible who refused to stay invisible. The next morning, my lawyer called. His voice was brisk. "Edward, the DA wants to move quickly. They'll subpoena the documents officially tomorrow. That means today is your last quiet day." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Then today, I prepare." After we hung up, I stood in the center of my living room, breathing in the stillness. Helen's photo smiled down at me from the mantel. "Tomorrow," I whispered to her. "Tomorrow they face the truth." I slid the evidence into a leather satchel, checked the lock twice, and placed it by the door. The storm had broken, yes, but I was ready to walk straight into it. The courthouse smelled of old wood and colder justice. I pushed the heavy doors open, satchel clutched in my hand, Helen's pocket watch tucked close to my chest. Reporters swarmed the steps outside, shouting David's name, snapping photos, their lenses hungry for ruin. But inside, the hush was heavier. A dozen heads turned as I walked the aisle toward the front. Some saw a frail widower in a worn coat. Let them. They'd soon see otherwise. David sat at the defendant's table, face, pale tie crooked. Claire was beside him, perfectly composed, her red lipstick unshaken. But when our eyes met, hers flickered just for a second. Fear. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge, stern and silver-haired, took her seat. The district attorney rose first. "Your Honor, the state charges David Harris with attempted fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud his father of property and assets. Today we will show not just intent, but action." The words rang in the chamber. My son shrank in his seat. The DA began by laying out the timeline. The documents, the forged signatures, and the sedative are discussed in Claire's emails. I watched each page I'd collected flash on the projector screen, one after another, the truth finally seeing daylight. David's lawyer scrambled, objecting at every turn, but the judge's gavel cut him down. Then came the first witness. "Call Lucia Marquez." Gasps rippled. David spun in his chair, eyes wide. Claire's face went rigid, her lips tightening like a trap snapping shut. Lucia stepped forward, clutching her purse, trembling slightly. But when she raised her hand to swear in, her voice was steady. She told them everything. The overheard whispers the night she'd been ordered to leave the room, the way Claire had bought the sedatives under a false prescription. Her words spilled like water breaking through a dam. David's lawyer tore into her. "Miss Marquez, aren't you just a disgruntled employee, bitter at being dismissed?" She lifted her chin. "Dismissed? I quit, because I wouldn't watch them destroy a man who never deserved it." Her eyes flicked to me. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself the smallest nod. Then came the twist no one expected. Claire asked to speak. Her lawyer whispered frantically, shaking his head. But she stood anyway. "Your Honor," she said, voice smooth as glass, "I wish to cooperate with the state. I have emails, bank records, and correspondence showing that David orchestrated everything. I was misled. I was pressured. A liar. David roared, slamming his fist on the table. The gavel cracked, the judge warning him to sit down. Claire kept her eyes on the judge, ignoring him entirely. I have proof, and I'm willing to surrender it in exchange for leniency. The room erupted in whispers. My son's wife had just thrown him to the wolves. I sat perfectly still, but inside I felt the click of gears turning, the final piece falling into place. The DA pressed forward with her evidence. Bank transfers from accounts under David's name, wire instructions to shadowy lenders, even a recorded voicemail where he begged an associate for more time. Every word, every number tightened the noose. David's defense was in shambles. He sputtered, shouted about loyalty, about family, about betrayal. But every outburst only painted him smaller. Finally, the DA turned to me. Mr. Harris, can you tell the court why you're here today? I stood the room watching. My voice was low even. I'm here, I said, because my son thought I was weak. He thought he could erase me. But a man doesn't measure his strength in how loud he shouts or how much he takes. He measures it in what he refuses to lose. My wife's memory, my life's work, my dignity. That's why I'm here. Silence fell. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. The judge's eyes softened for just a moment before she looked back at her notes. At last, the verdict. The jury filed back after only an hour. The foreman rose. On the charges of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, we find the defendant, David Harris, guilty. The word hung in the air like a bell tolling the end of an era. David's face collapsed. He shook his head violently, looking to me as if I might save him. Dad, please. You can't let them do this. I'm your son. I met his eyes, calm, unflinching. You stopped being my son the moment you tried to poison me. His scream echoed as the bailiff pulled him away, cuffs clinking. Claire sat stone-faced, already speaking quietly, with prosecutors carving her escape. The judge banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. As the room emptied, I sat for a moment longer, letting the silence settle. The satchel was lighter now. Justice had carried its share. I stood slowly, pocket watch warm in my palm. Helen's watch, Helen's time. And as I walked out the courthouse doors past reporters shouting my name, I didn't answer. Because some truths don't need repeating. They simply stand. The courthouse steps were cold under my shoes as I descended slowly, each step carrying the weight of decades. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters barked questions, their microphones reaching like grasping hands. But I said nothing. I kept walking, the leather satchel empty, now my hands free. The city's winter air cut sharply against my face, but inside I felt warm, warmer than I had in years. Helen's pocket watch ticked in my coat pocket. Not the tick of waiting anymore, but the tick of moving forward. I drove home in silence. The old Chevy rattled like it always did, but tonight the sound felt different. Not a burden, not a reminder of age, but steady, loyal. Like me. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light I'd fixed last spring shone brighter than ever. For once, I didn't feel like I was walking into a house too big for one man. I set my coat on the rack, placed the pocket watch on the mantel. Helen's picture looked back at me, smiling, that quiet smile. It's over, I whispered. My voice didn't crack. It was simply true. The days that followed moved slowly. David was held without bail, and the newspapers filled with his downfall. Claire vanished into the system, her bargains with prosecutors making headlines for a week before fading away. Neighbors nodded at me differently now, not pitying, not dismissive, respectful. At the grocery store, Mrs. Turner from down the street touched my arm. "Edward," she said softly, "you did right." Not many men could have faced their son like that. I managed a thin smile. Sometimes doing right doesn't feel like winning. But it is. She squeezed my arm. It is. But the victory wasn't only public. It was private. Miguel stopped by one afternoon handing me a set of fresh keys. "Garage is yours again, Eddie. Cleared your name at the registry this morning. No disputes left." I ran my fingers over the cool metal, the grooves catching the light. "Feels like starting over." "Not starting over," he said. "Starting fresh. Difference matters." One evening, as the sun dipped low, Lucia knocked on my door. She carried no purse this time, no fear, just a small tin of cookies in her hands. "I baked," she said shyly. "Thought you might like some." I invited her in. We sat at the table, steam rising from the coffee mugs I'd set out. She looked around the room at the photos of Helen, at the books stacked neatly on the shelves. "You loved her very much," she said. "Still do," I answered. Lucia nodded. "She'd be proud of what you did, of how you carried yourself." I didn't reply, but my eyes stung. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. But the real twist, the one no courtroom could deliver, came a week later. A letter arrived in the mail. Handwritten, the ink was blotched in places. David's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. "Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve another chance at being called your son. But sitting in this cell, stripped of everything I see now, what I became, what I did to you, to Mom's memory, to myself. If there's anything left of me worth saving, it's because of you. I don't expect an answer, but I needed to say it. David." I read it twice, 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it inside Helen's Bible between the pages she used to mark with pressed flowers. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about him. It was about me, and I chose to let the anger go. Not to forget, not to excuse, but to set myself free. The next Sunday, I drove to the churchyard where Helen rested. The wind rustled the bare branches, the ground crisp with frost. I brushed the stone, clean laid fresh lilies at its base. "I thought revenge would feel louder," I said softly. "But it feels like this, quiet, steady, like breathing again after holding it too long." The air was still, but in the stillness I felt her with me. I stayed until the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in gold and fire. That night, as I locked up the garage, I noticed something small on the workbench. A toy car, rusted wheels loose. David had left it there when he was a boy. I picked it up, turned it in my hand. For a moment I saw him again, 7 years old, grease on his cheek, grinning when the engine sputtered to life under my guidance. I placed the toy gently back on the shelf. Some things you don't erase. You simply leave them where they belong. So this is how it ends, not with shouting, not with fists, not even with triumph, but with stillness. With the sound of a pocket watch ticking steadily in the quiet of a house that is mine again. With a garage reclaimed, a name restored, and a dignity no one can steal. I didn't win by destroying them. I won by refusing to be destroyed. And as I sit here tonight, coffee steaming beside me, I know this revenge doesn't have to be fire and fury. Sometimes the greatest revenge is silence, the silence of a man who walks forward free. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.